What's going on, everyone? Welcome to this episode of TikTokers Who Did Terrible Things. For those of you who are new, this is a series in which we take a closer look at some of the most horrific and disturbing crimes ever committed by individuals associated with that platform. From dire consequences to rampage killings, we will be exploring some of the darkest corners of the human psyche, all the while uncovering the chilling details of these heinous crimes. Now, in this video, we will be covering episodes 13 through 15. With that in mind, let's talk about some TikTokers who did terrible things, episode 13, Noah Gale, otherwise known as M5 Noah on TikTok. Creator class type, I wanna go fast. Specialty, drives a BMW. Claim to fame, the following tragedy. So a lot of you may remember a kid by the name of Herren. For those of you who don't, this is the teen who was involved in an alleged street race that resulted in the deaths of two pedestrians. A woman by the name of Jessica Rubinall had been pushing her daughter in a stroller across the street when one of the two vehicles in question slammed into the pair, killing them on impact. Well, we were originally going to make this episode 13 over on TikTok. However, while Cameron did have an Instagram, there is absolutely no evidence to support that he actually had a TikTok. But I will say this, that kid was 100% sensationalized on the app itself. You see, Cameron would later be sentenced to 24 years in prison, as he had multiple driving infractions under his belt. And well, TikTokers from all over the world, specifically teen girls, began posting videos of Cameron demanding he be given a much lesser sentence, or even being let off the hook altogether. What's more is, this is because many of said individuals thought he was simply too cute to have his life wasted away in prison. But amongst all this madness, the unrelated yet similar and equally tragic case of Noah Gale garnered very little attention on the platform. In addition to this, the affluent teen would actually post a lot of the reckless things he had been doing, like driving his BMW down the highway at an extremely high rate of speed, cutting it up, asking people to bet on how fast he was actually going. Now in turn, the first individual in the comment section to guess that number correctly would receive a payment through Cash App, Venmo, or some sort of equivalent. Well, it is speculated that as time went on, Noah would continue to push the envelope over and over again, to the point where people's lives would eventually be taken. And on January 2nd of 2022, Noah had been traveling in excess of 150 miles an hour on Route 441, just west of Delray Beach, located in Florida. Once again, he's maniacally switching through lanes when all of a sudden, he plows straight through the back end of a Nissan Juke, sending it flying off in the distance, rolling several times. Now, the back end of that SUV had been so crunched up, it was pushed well beyond the passenger seats. What's worse is, it had been fully loaded down with passengers, all 6 of whom would unfortunately lose their lives. Now, it's worth pointing out, all 6 of them had just gotten off working an extremely long shift at a local farm nearby. Daughters of mothers and mothers of daughters would unfortunately not be making it home after that fateful afternoon. Well, as investigators turn up on scene, they'd fairly quickly take note of Noah's Instagram handle on the back windshield of that BMW. This in turn would lead them to his TikTok, where they would discover video after video of Noah performing these extremely dangerous acts. And his Instagram, along with his TikTok, in combination with the severity of the accident, gave them all the evidence they needed to charge Noah with 6 counts of vehicular homicide. Moreover, the teen's bail was set to $300,000. However, this is where things begin to get maddening for a lot of people who have looked into this case. Gale's attorney argued the teen should be able to await his trial from the comforts of his parents' home, due to the fact he had some sort of mental condition from the age of 12. And the very next Monday after his preliminary hearing, Gale was cut loose under 3 conditions. 1. He must be supervised by a responsible parent at all times. 2. He may only leave for medical purposes. And 3. He is to have no contact with the families of the victims. Since then, Noah's attorney has tried to modify the terms of his release, thus allowing him to travel out of state for expert help. However, this motion has since been denied. Gale is currently still on house arrest awaiting his trial. With that in mind, what are your opinions about these motions? Do you feel he should have been released? Or should he have to be held until his trial? Without further delay, let's hop right into episode 14. Herren, otherwise known as Herren Chowdhury 02 on TikTok. Creator class type, actor. Specialty, romanticizing violence. Claim to fame, one hell of a terrifying scene. Well, leading up to mid-2020, the then 21-year-old TikToker had been posting for quite some time. With that in mind, a majority of his content enveloped these weird depictions of certain situations, usually containing 2 distinct underlying tones. 1. Domestic violence. 2. A crime of passion. Now, little did his following know at the time, these uploads had actually been giving a fairly good insight into who he was in real life. More importantly, how he had been behaving towards another individual. You see, there was this 19-year-old girl by the name of Naina. Khan had met her just a year prior while attending classes at a university. Well, it was during this period the young man had quite literally became obsessed with Naina, even going as far as to propose to her on multiple occasions even when she made it clear she didn't want anything to do with him. And this is where things start to take a fairly disturbing turn. Naina had been living with her parents at the time. Well, as luck would have it, it wouldn't be long before Khan began showing up to her parents' house uninvited, literally threatening to kill her if she didn't marry him, like directly in front of her own parents. It was at this point Naina's father forbid him from ever returning to his property, and that he was to cut all contact. However, this would be easier said than done, as more fuel will be added to the fire when Sher Khan receives notice Naina has gotten engaged. Moreover, within just a few days of him finding this out, the wedding was to take place. And here it is. On June 19th, 2020, he begins the process of planning out one of those if I can't have you, no one can sort of attacks. He calls up 5 friends and they head out into the night looking for Naina. Now, within just a short while, they are questioning people around her residence as to where she was off to, fairly quickly finding out they had gone to purchase a SIM card at a nearby market. Wasting little time, they hop back on their mopeds and make their way over to the shopping center. As they pull up beside a Chinese restaurant, Sher Khan spots Naina walking around town with her mother. He then hops off his moped, instantly grabs Naina, and begins shaking her violently while screaming at her. Now, Naina's mother would try to step in, but Sher Khan would in turn throw Naina to the ground, then slap her mother so hard he knocked her unconscious. It was at this point Naina gets back up and begins slapping Sher Khan several times. Now, Naina's father had wandered away from them for less than a minute, and he sees all of this going down in the distance. He would then begin sprinting as fast as he can towards Khan. However, a few of Khan's friends would prevent him from getting there in time. When all of a sudden, chaos absolutely erupts. Khan pulls out a knife and plunges it directly into the throat of Naina. Pedestrians all around them are left in absolute shock as the sounds of screams begin to rattle the area. He would then repeatedly begin tagging Naina in her abdomen with that knife, dishing out a great deal of damage in the process. Moreover, the young woman's father literally had to watch it unfold in real time, being completely subdued. Now, fortunately enough, Naina's mother was able to tear off Khan's mask prior to being struck down, thus allowing everyone in the area to immediately identify him. The 6 perpetrators then hopped back onto their mopeds and rode off into the night. Naina's father would later state everyone just kind of stood there watching it unfold, and not a single person even tried to render aid or help me in the process. And unfortunately for Naina, in the early hours of June 20th, she unfortunately passed away due to her injuries. What's worse is, she along with her 25 relatives were scheduled to depart for the wedding that very same day. Now, just a few days later, Sher Khan along with all 5 of these perpetrators would be arrested. In addition to this, further investigation would uncover some rather disturbing videos posted in the days leading up to this crime, with each and every one of them allegedly foreshadowing the entire event. But it's also worth pointing out, these videos don't really seem to exist anymore. If they do, I most certainly haven't been able to find them. Now, while I would love to tell you about how long they were sentenced to, the only sites that seem to have that information you have to pay for. And with how small this channel is, having a family and children with living paycheck to paycheck, I just simply can't bring myself to pay for these sources as of now. Without wasting any more of your time, let's delve right into episode 15, Ashwini Kashyap, otherwise known as Johnny Data. Creator class type, villain. Specialty, revenge. Claim to fame. So this one takes us back to 2019, where Kashyap, like many others in India, had these big dreams of becoming a Bollywood actor. Well, one of the ways he was able to sort of live out this fantasy was to get on TikTok and start pumping out content. That being said, most of his uploads contained these dark speeches about how he had been wronged by society for so long that he was 100% ready to unleash his revenge on the entire world. Well, to the roughly 23,000 people that had been following, they would have no reason to believe there was any truth behind the threats he had been making. But unfortunately enough, this couldn't be further from the truth. You see, leading up to 2019, Johnny had always really been sort of a loose hinge, and time again he would allow people to walk all over him in real life. It was mainly due to this he kind of fell out of place and started to carry a lot of resentment in his heart. Well, this would be made all the worse when his mother passed away due to COVID in that very same year. And I will say this, the story of his mother's passing is quite heavy in and of itself. I mean, for the last 5 years of her life, she had been left paralyzed, confined to a small brick house, where allegedly he himself would take on the responsibility of care. And when she got COVID, this would take an absolute toll on her body, thus taking her life in the process. Now, people that were close to Johnny say this is when they could physically see him start to lose grips with reality. He started pumping out more TikToks, isolating himself, and thus stopped having any legitimate real-world interactions with people, including several members of his own family. He then began posting about the pain of his mother's passing through various forms of social media, and if a single soul had actually been following them, they would have seen the warning signs of what was about to transpire well before it had happened. On August 14th of that same year, Kashyap began posting some rather cryptic messages on Facebook under the alternate name Aditya Rajput. Things like, "No one will be forgiven. Wait and watch. I'll destroy everything. The devil is coming. The devil is ready. I won't go out without killing. I do not give second chances to betrayers, and I will let them know exactly when I will be settling my scores with them." Yet again, no one had seen these because no one was following him, thus no reports were filed. Just 1 month later, in September, Ashwini had finished a 10-page manifesto which included the following information. It stated he was pretty much angry with virtually everyone, including his own brother over monetary disputes, his sister due to the fact she called the police on him several times, and he was even bitter at his own father for not dividing up the family property after his mother had passed away. In addition to this, there were several other names on this list of people he was going to start mowing down. With that, Ashwini calls up his father in order to borrow funds, under the pretext it will be used to make a fresh start in Singapore. However, he had no intentions of doing so. As a matter of fact, he would use this money to purchase an AK-47, a handgun, and a fair amount of ammunition. He then made his way back home and posted his final TikTok. Title, "Goodbye," accompanied by a clip that simply showed the letter R. He then called up a total of 5 people, inviting them to a party in the middle of the woods. Among those invited were a couple of men by the name of Raul and Krishna. And well, at some point after they are good and drunk, they run out of eggs. Kashyap would then pull out a little extra cash and send 3 of those individuals, leaving himself, Raul, and Krishna. And so it begins. The TikTok villain whips out an AK-47, pumping a single round into Raul's head. And as Krishna sees this going down, he begins to make a mad dash out of the woods, but before he can do so, he too would be struck down with a single bullet. Data would then wander over to the 2 men, pumping a few more rounds into them before fleeing off into the woods. Unfortunately, neither Raul nor Krishna would survive. Well, within less than 2 hours, a full-scale manhunt involving well over 350 law enforcement and army personnel is launched. They begin combing the dense forests as well as adjacent sugarcane fields, but to no avail. An additional 5 days would go by, and they would find not a single shred of evidence as to where he went off to. That is, until he struck once more, this time busting into the home of Nikita Sharma, pistol in hand. As he enters, she sees him begin to raise his pistol towards her children. It was at this point she begins full-on sprinting towards Kashyap, who would then fire a total of 5 rounds, fatally wounding Nikita in the process. Now, as her husband hears the chaos unfolding from within their domicile, he would then enter the main foyer as Nikita had been dropped. And it was at that point the chase was on. Johnny begins running through the streets as fast as he can, with Nikita's husband following closely behind. He would then hop on an e-rickshaw, which, for those of you who don't know, is essentially an electric bike with a small trailer containing a few seats behind them, sort of like a taxi service. He then points the gun at the driver, demanding to be driven out of town. Her husband then hops on another rickshaw and explains what's just happened, and as they begin to close distance between themselves and Ashwini, the perpetrator hops off and disappears into a sugarcane field, once again running off into the wild. Now, little did anyone know, Kashyap's plan had sort of been deteriorating throughout the entirety of these attacks. As a matter of fact, there were several instances he came quite close to killing other individuals, but for one reason or another, he had to flee and seek out other opportunities. Well, later on that same evening, Ashwini hops on a bus, covering his face with a white handkerchief. Now, this bus was supposed to take him to the city of Bahapur in order to continue his killing spree. Upon entering the bus, Johnny notifies the driver to let him off about 2 kilometers from their destination, then takes a seat. However, Ashwini allegedly hadn't slept in quite a few days, and As they begin to close on the city of Bahapur, he falls asleep, which would in turn be his last slip-up. At roughly 12:15 a.m., the bus arrives in Bahapur and is immediately surrounded by law enforcement personnel. Johnny then wakes up and notices there is a flashlight shining through his handkerchief, which he is now using to cover his entire face. In one final motion, the man himself pulls out his pistol, places it to his head, and pulls the trigger, bringing the 5-day manhunt to an end. Now it's worth pointing out, there was an additional 14-page diary found in his backpack, filled to the brim with hate, aggression, sadness, but most of all talking about how he couldn't see the woman he loved continue on without him. So that's it, y'all. That is going to do it for this episode of TikTokers Who Did Terrible Things. As always, if you think of anything I missed, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. In addition to that, we also have a few new videos posted over on TikTok, and as a matter of fact, we are currently up to 32 episodes. With that, I sincerely hope you have an amazing whatever it is, wherever you may be. Peace out.